well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Welcome to another edition of Bearing Arms, Cam and Company. Glad that you've joined us today on the program. Coming up in just a matter of moments or so, we're going to talk with Delegate Nick Freitas from the Commonwealth of Virginia, also the congressional candidate in the 7th Congressional District, one of the seats around the country where Republicans are hoping for a pickup there in November. This is traditionally a pretty conservative district, or at least a fairly Republican district. It was represented by Eric Cantor. He was ousted in a primary a few years ago by Dave Bratt, and then in 2018, in the blue wave election, Abigail Spanberger, a Democrat, narrowly won her race for the 7th District. Now, Nick Freitas has grabbed the Republican nod. He'll be taking on Spanberger in November, so we'll talk about that with the delegate, as well as a look at the special session that is coming up in less than a month now, August 18th in Richmond, Virginia. That's when lawmakers will reconvene to discuss. We don't exactly know yet, honestly. Supposedly this was a call to deal with budgetary issues, the decline in expected tax revenue because of the coronavirus closures. But Governor Ralph Northam has now expanded this to include police reform and, quote, social justice reform as well. And there are a lot of rumors swirling around that this could mean a revival of House Bill 961, Governor Northam's sweeping gun, magazine, and suppressor ban that was defeated in the Virginia State Senate earlier this year when 4 rural Democrats actually objected to that bill. Again, a lot of rumors going around about what might happen with that legislation. We'll talk about it coming up here in just a moment. Before we do that, however, the Trump campaign has a special offer just for you. President Trump really wants to give you a signed 2020 Make America Great Again hat. Now, he wants to make sure that the lucky winner is one of his top supporters, so be sure to enter soon because this is an opportunity you don't want to miss. Offer is only going to a select group of supporters, and you are one of them. All you have to do is text ARMS to 88022 today for your chance to win a signed 2020 Make America Great Again hat and own a piece of history. Again, that is ARMS to 88022 to enter to win this contest and join President Trump in the fight to keep America great for 4 more years. Paid for by Donald J. Trump for President Incorporated. So let's get to our conversation with Delegate Nick Freitas, again, Republican congressional candidate in Virginia's 7th Congressional District, as well as a current member of the Virginia General Assembly. A lot to talk about. Take a look and a listen. Delegate Nick Freitas, thank you, sir, for coming on the program. It's good talking with you today.
Yo, you as well. Thanks for having me on, Ken.
You bet. First of all, congratulations on your primary win in the 7th Congressional District. I want to talk about what's going on in November, but what are you doing right now in terms of your congressional campaign?
Well, for a good portion of the primary, the nominating contest, we focused a lot on running against Abigail Spanberger. I was never really in competition with my other Republicans. They're my political allies, and we're working together. We just had to pick which candidate we thought would be best to take on Abigail. But we really thought it was important to focus on that race as early as possible. And so we've been talking a lot about her voting record. We've been talking a lot about what's going on, especially what's going on in these cities and localities that have been almost controlled by Democrats unilaterally for decades now, and really drawing the contrast between the way Democrats seek to solve problems, which always seems to be through more government power and control, and the way Republicans want to solve problems, which is about empowering individuals to have more control over their lives, their business, their family, their health care, and which one of those two approaches actually produces better results.
Well, I know that Spanberger has, tried to present herself as a very moderate figure. This is a pretty conservative congressional district. But I got to say, I think that a lot of her positions, when you start to drill down, are anything but moderate.
Well, it was interesting. The Washington Post did their absolute best to do to do cover for Abigail Spanberger when I noted that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez votes in line with the president more than Abigail does. And they tried to say it was half true, but then when you read the article, they ended up proving my point that it was absolutely true. In fact, AOC votes in line with the president almost twice as much as Abigail. And this is the problem that we're at right now. This is the problem the Democrats are facing. Abigail says she's a moderate. Well, she claims to be a moderate within the Democratic Party. Unfortunately, it has moved so far to the left that saying you're a moderate in the Democratic Party really doesn't mean what most people think it means. It means voting with Pelosi over 90% of the time. It means supporting the sort of Medicaid for all that we see going forward, or other sort of government interventions in the healthcare. It means more restrictions on our Second Amendment rights that don't provide any sort of security for public safety. It means abandoning or defunding the police. And that's the problem. Those are the positions she's going to have to clarify where she actually stands. And I think voters in the 7th district are not going to be happy with what they hear.
You know, it's interesting to me, Delegate, because I think gun control advocates in particular find themselves in a bit of an ideological fix right now. I mean, on the one hand, again, as you say, politicians like Abigail Spanberger support all kinds of new gun control laws, which require enforcement from armed agents of the state, right? Armed law enforcement officers. And yet she is all about defunding the police, all about depolicing. So, it seems to me like there's a contradiction in terms here. Let's put more gun laws on the books. Let's have less law enforcement. I kind of think the other way around is the better way to go. Let's have fewer of these, particularly these, nonviolent possessory offenses. You're going to go to prison because your magazine's too big, or we don't like the kind of gun that you own, or you haven't registered your firearm. And let's focus law enforcement resources on the violent offenses. If you're a carjacker, if you're a home invader, if you commit a drive-by shooting, there should be swift and certain consequences for that.
Well, I think there's two big problems right now that Democrats are having to reconcile. One is they've said that you don't need guns because the police will protect you. And now they're saying defund the police. And then they want rigorous law enforcement when it comes to coming and criminalizing you for owning a 15-round magazine. But if you set Richmond on fire, they'll handcuff the police and they won't let them actually go out there and do their job. And so this is what I think a lot of people all over the 7th district, especially those people who live close to Richmond, they're taking a look at what's going on. And Richmond has almost been unilaterally controlled by Democrats since 1868. So it's not as if they can look at Republicans and say that we're the problem with this situation. It's once again, they want to use the government in order to try to mold society the way they think it should be. And that causes them to interfere in a lot of things the government was never designed to do. But then they want to completely ignore the genuine responsibilities they have to actually provide for public safety, ensuring property rights. And that's where the contradiction comes into play. And I think people are seeing it in full display right now.
Speaking of remolding society, coming up here in less than a month now, August 18th, we're going to have a special session in Richmond. I don't know how this is going to work. Do you know how this is going to work? Is this going to be held outside? Are y'all going to be actually let back inside the Capitol this time around?
I'm not actually sure what the logistics are going to look like just yet. We know we're going back down August 18th. We've heard some rumors on how long it's going to be. I think most of the bills are going to be around COVID and criminal justice reform. Unfortunately, we have a lot of Democrats bringing back some incredibly, just absolute violations of Second Amendment rights. And like we said earlier, it's pretty ridiculous when you're telling the police that they can't actually go out there and do their job. You're advocating for defunding the police. And then you're telling law-abiding citizens at the same time that, hey, not only are law enforcement not going to show up to protect you, but you're not allowed to actually protect yourself, or at least to have the means to protect yourself. And that's the sort of argument that they're going to have to try to make. And it's going to be interesting to watch members of the press try to give them cover for all this. I don't think these bills fall within the spirit of what we were trying to do with COVID. A lot of the criminal justice reform bills, and I just want to say this, there's some agreement. I've carried criminal justice reform with things like civil asset forfeiture reform. Mm-hmm. I've carried criminal justice reform bills for letting people that were nonviolent offenders or offenders that never created a victim to be able to expunge their records so that they could get on with their lives once they served their time. I think there's room for agreement on some of these issues. But the problem is I don't look at what they're doing as criminal justice reform as much as it is just anti-law enforcement. And that's not the appropriate approach to take. And so there's going to be a debate on this, but unfortunately the Democrats do have the votes to do what they want. And Governor Northam has already demonstrated that he will pretty much give them whatever he wants, regardless of the fact that even when he knows that it's overreach.
Yeah. And let's dig into some of the specifics here. You said that you're hearing rumors that there are going to be some Second Amendment bills or gun control bills brought up. Governor Northam, I think in Culpeper, Virginia, earlier this week made some comment about House Bill 961. That's the gun ban, the magazine ban, suppressor ban. He talked about that coming back in January, which might indicate that the governor doesn't necessarily want to push this sweeping gun ban in the months before the election. But is that ultimately up to him, or is this up to Delegate Levine or some other politician to go ahead and reintroduce this gun ban? And what are you hearing about the possibilities that might come up during the special session?
I think they're going to try to introduce them. I think the Democrat House leadership and the governor certainly understands that they don't want to drop a bunch of gun confiscation bills right ahead of the 2020 election. But like you said, it doesn't mean they don't want them.
Mm-hmm.
They're just trying to do it strategically. So they understand that it is bad news for them ahead of the 2020 election cycle to talk about confiscating people's guns or criminalizing innocent people who have never done anything wrong simply because they own a 15-round magazine. But again, that doesn't mean they don't want to do it. They just want to be strategic in how they do it in the hopes that the voters won't be awakened to what they're trying to do. And I think the ship has sailed on that one. I think people understand, we've bought the lie for too long that, quote, nobody wants to take your guns. Well, what we found out is, no, they absolutely do want to do that. And as much as they want to make this about machine guns or fully automatic weapons, what they're really after is pretty much everything. Semi-automatic weapons. I mean, they really want to create a situation that you might see in England or Australia or Canada right now where the ability to own simple firearms that you use for self-defense, for hunting, whatever it is, would now all of a sudden make you a criminal. And I just think that's completely antithetical to why we have the Second Amendment in the first place, which again is not just for hunting. It's so that you can protect yourself, protect your family, protect your property rights.
Amen to that. I mean, yeah, we just saw Senator Mark Warner and Senator Tim Kaine introduce in the Senate. I think it was something like the Make Virginia Safer Act of 2020, basically taking all of the gun control laws that were passed during this last session and putting this forth at the federal level, saying this should apply nationwide. And it's fascinating to me, Delegate. I went and I did some research because they say that these laws are making Virginia safer. 2018, before any of these gun control laws went on the books, Virginia had the 46th lowest violent crime rate in the country. I mean, we were one of the safest states in the nation, and we continue to be so without any of Ralph Northam's anti-gun agenda on the books. So I have a hard time, with the fact that they're trying to make this a public safety argument. I think, as you say, this is about disarming the public, not about protecting them.
Well, let me ask you this. If they were really concerned about public safety and they were really convinced that this was going to make people safer, can someone please explain to me why they were releasing violent criminals? And I mean people that have been convicted of second-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, assault, battery. They were releasing these people during COVID. And in some cases, they weren't even giving the Commonwealth's attorneys or the families of the victims sufficient heads up before they released them back into the community. So this idea that this is about public safety and about genuine concern, I just don't buy it. The fact that this governor declared a state of emergency 2 years before an incredibly peaceful pro-Second Amendment rally in Richmond, but waited for, 24, 48 hours while Richmond was burning in order to declare a state of emergency there. This is not about public safety for them. I'm sorry, it isn't. And if this actually worked as a public safety measure, then someone please explain to me Chicago. Someone explain to me Washington, D.C. Someone explain to me how you can have some of the strictest gun laws in the country in places where crime is incredibly high to include violent crime and suggest that this is about public safety. This is about control. And I'm sorry, but I just don't buy it anymore. If they were really concerned about protecting innocent people, they would allow law-abiding citizens to have the means to protect themselves, and they wouldn't be so soft on incredibly violent criminals. We had to debate with them relentlessly to try to get them to exclude rapists and child molesters from the parole that they were trying to set up in Virginia last year. And we finally got them to compromise on that issue, but they tried to put it back in. And we had to go through the process of explaining, you are going to require a rape victim to come back every 2 to 3 years and explain to a parole board why the person that abused her should not be released. And then you want to lecture us on public safety? So no, I'm sorry, I just don't buy it anymore, Cam. I just don't.
Yeah. Now, what about these bills that you say are not necessarily police reform or criminal justice reform, but are simply anti-policing bills? I mean, it seems like your Democratic colleagues in the General Assembly, they've already taken, I think, a punitive approach to law enforcement. I know that we had measures going after pay raises for sheriffs and those who supported the Second Amendment sanctuary movement. They've already tried to punish people in law enforcement who've spoken out in support of our Second Amendment rights. But what do they want to do in this special session?
Well, one of the things that they're doing that I do not understand the reasoning behind it is they're trying to lessen assault on a police officer from a felony down to a misdemeanor. And my question there is, what signal does that send? And I think people need to understand that when the reason why law enforcement officers have some of these protections is when they go out, they're not just defending themselves or the department, they're actually defending the community as a whole. And we want our law enforcement to be seen as a representative of the people, defending people and defending their civil liberties. That's the sort of law enforcement we want. And we want people to understand that, yes, there are going to be consequences when you go out there and you harm the people's representative in order to not only enforce the law, but to keep our community safe. Now, there's other measures that we all agree with to include law enforcement. One of the things that we've talked about is decertifying bad officers. You have officers that have been guilty. They've had due process. They've been found guilty of abusing police powers. And you have chiefs, you have sheriffs, you have other police officers that want the ability to decertify them so they can't go to another department 4 counties away and continue to do the same thing. Those are areas of agreement. And those are things that we can do with bipartisan support, with support of law enforcement. And that's what we should be focused on right now. But when you're going to create an environment where you basically tell people that we're going to lessen the penalty for going out and harming an officer, I'm sorry. Tell me how that contributes to greater public safety. But these are the arguments that we've had. And Cam, I just want to say this. One of the things a lot of my Democrat colleagues don't understand, and I've brought this up before on the floor, every time you pass a new law, regulation, tax, fee, fine, you are inviting a situation where law enforcement is going to clash with your constituents.
Mm-hmm.
And at no point when that happens do politicians ever come back and take any sort of responsibility for the fact that their great idea just had to be a law. And men and women in blue are living at the business end of every stupid thing politicians do. And so, yes, we want to make sure that we have the best equipped, best trained law enforcement. We want to make sure that they have a great appreciation for our civil liberties and protecting our constitutional rights, as well as enforcing the law. So by the same token, if we want to actually see less clashes between law enforcement and citizens, then maybe we should start with not trying to criminalize everything or not trying to make a law for every good idea that some politician has. If it's such a good idea, why can't you convince people to do it? Why do you have to coerce them to do it through law enforcement?
Absolutely. Absolutely right, Delegate. I mean, I've written at Bearing Arms that, every new gun law creates a new gun crime. And as you say, those things have to be enforced, creates a crime out of thin air. I mean, in the state of Virginia, June 30th, I could have sold you a firearm. And we would not have had to go through a background check. If I tried to do that today and we didn't go through a background check, all of a sudden that would be a criminal offense. You and I haven't changed. It's the law that's changed. And meanwhile, the violent criminals, they're not going to pay any attention one way or the other.
Well, and I think another example that we need to bring up, because people talk about this and it seems the way it's sold to the public is, well, yeah, why wouldn't you do extensive background checks? Well, you and I both know that in most cases when you have to buy a firearm, you do have to go through background checks. But here's a very practical situation. Let's say you're someone that's living in Richmond. You feel unsafe because, again, the police have pretty much been handcuffed in their duties at the same time that rioters are going around and setting buildings on fire. And so you would like to be able to have a firearm to protect yourself. And so you ask me as your neighbor, hey, can I borrow a shotgun for right now? And I say, yeah, absolutely. Let me teach you how to, properly, load it and care for it and use it. Well, now we just broken the law. Because that's now a temporary transfer that took place. And, they talk about temporary transfers in order to save life. Well, what exactly does that constitute? And then they pass these laws where they say things that if you recklessly leave a firearm in such a way that a minor is harmed as a result, again, most people look at that and say, okay, that makes perfect sense. The question is how do you actually interpret that? If I have a firearm on my nightstand by my bed, and someone is breaking into the house to try to harm my daughter, and my daughter grabs that firearm to defend herself, am I now in trouble? Was that reckless? Well, I guess the Commonwealth's attorney is going to decide that because there's no real definition for it in the law. And one of the things we need people to understand is that the reason why we care so much about the Second Amendment is not just because we're gun collectors or we like to hunt. The reason why we care about it is because anytime the government tells you you're not allowed to have the very, very simple, reasonable means to be able to defend yourself, they are really making you more vulnerable. And at the end of the day, the person that's benefited the most from the Second Amendment is the weaker person. It's the more vulnerable person that now has the means to be able to defend themselves from a stronger attacker. And what we've seen going on in some of these cities under Democrat control is just a perfect example of why we believe that and why it's important.
Absolutely. All right. Last question for you, Delegate. We'll turn back to the congressional race here. How many debates would you like to have with Abigail Spanberger, and has she agreed to any so far?
Honestly, we'd like to have as many as we can get. We're gonna push out 5 and see if we can do that. I think that's a reasonable number to do from August through early November. we have a big district. We want to make sure that we can host enough debates to where if people would like to show up in person or view online, they have the ability to do so. And we're willing to work with Spanberger's campaign in order to determine what those would look like. But we think 5 debates is a reasonable number. We'll see what she says.
All right, Delegate Dave Freitas, always good talking with you, sir. Thank you so much for spending some time with us today, and look forward to talking again soon.
Always a pleasure. Thanks for what you do, Cam.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I don't see 5 debates happening. I don't think Abigail Spanberger wants to have 5 debates, but hopefully we'll get several debates. And again, we don't know how it's going to look like. Are they going to be held in person? Will you actually be able to attend? Will you have to tune in on Zoom? Who knows how this is going to work out, but we will be paying close attention to that race because, again, it is, I think, one of the more competitive races around the country, not just around the state of Virginia, and again, an opportunity to claw back some ground in the House for Second Amendment supporters. Before we get to today's Armed Citizen story, our good deed of the day, our recidivist report, a reminder that the Trump campaign has a special offer just for you. President Trump really wants to give you a signed 2020 Make America Great Again hat. He wants to make sure that this lucky winner is one of his top supporters, so be sure to enter soon because this is an opportunity that you don't want to miss. Offer is only going to a select group of supporters, and you are one of them. All you have to do is text ARMS to 88022 for your chance to win a signed 2020 Make America Great Again hat and own a piece of history. Again, that is ARMS to 88022 today to enter to win this contest and join President Trump in the fight to keep America great for 4 more years. Paid for by Donald J. Trump for President Incorporated. All right, so we will begin today with our recidivist report, a story out of Florida. This is a sad story, I got to tell you. A man who shot himself after a chase in St. Johns County, Florida, actually a suspect in a double homicide in Lantana, Florida. And as it turns out, this guy had basically told anybody who would listen that something like this was going to happen. Anthony Ashen Scott, 23 years of age, died after he shot himself during a Wednesday night police chase in St. Johns County, according to the Florida Times-Union. He had a restraining order against him from one of the 2 women found shot to death at their Lantana home. The injunction had been filed against him by one sister against incidents against her younger sibling that included, you ready for this, a threat to, quote, kill anyone who files a restraining order. Yeah. St. Johns County had received an alert out of Palm Beach, Florida, to look for Stout. He was facing 2 new warrants out for murder. He was in a white Honda. They spotted that vehicle on Interstate 95. They gave chase. Chuck Mulligan, spokesman with the St. Johns County Sheriff's Department, said that they initiated that pursuit. Driver refused to stop, began to flee from the area. Deputies ahead of him deployed stop sticks. Suspect drove around him, struck a guardrail, which brought him to a stop. Deputies approached the vehicle and found the subject already sustained what appeared to be a self-inflicted gunshot wound. On Wednesday, Palm Beach officials had sent out an alert listing a car and a license plate believed to be connected to the sister's murder, saying that Stout was known to both victims. According to the Palm Beach Post, the 20-year-old homicide victim had sought protection for her 19-year-old sister in September, writing that she was, quote, in fear for my safety because the boyfriend said that he would kill anyone who filed one. He was also, by the way, on probation following a 2018 beating of a different girlfriend. He had been jailed in December for violating that probation, but was released on July the 3rd. And here we are less than a month later. Stout, believed to be responsible for 2 murders before taking his own life. Our armed citizen story of the day. Again, I told you that was a tough one. And, listen, this is just my personal opinion. I'm not opposed to orders of protection by any means. If somebody is threatening you, take one out. But keep in mind that an order of protection is a piece of paper. It is not a suit of armor. And if somebody chooses to violate that order of protection, that may result in an additional charge that can be filed against them later. But that's really all that it does if somebody chooses to violate that order. So my advice is if your life is in danger to the point that you need to take out an order of protection, you also need to be taking additional steps to protect yourself. Now, it's your choice as to whether or not you want to own a firearm, get trained so that you can defend yourself with a firearm if need be. But please don't just leave it at getting that piece of paper and hoping that it will save your life. All right, on to our armed citizen story of the day from New Orleans. I think this might be the second story from the New Orleans area we've had this week, as a matter of fact. After a robber pulled a knife on a man on Magazine Street, a victim pulled a gun. Yes, somebody actually brought a knife to a gunfight there in New Orleans, Louisiana. That from the New Orleans Times-Picayune. This according to the New Orleans Police Department. They say that this attempted robbery on Magazine Street in downtown area, 3200 block, happened around 7:45 in the evening. Police say that there was supposed to be some sort of transaction, some sort of, that we don't know the details. We don't know if this was, hey, do you want to buy a TV? Or, hey, do you want to buy some drugs? But we do know that there was some type of transaction of purchase, according to New Orleans police. The victim then grabbed a gun when the guy pulled out a knife during this transaction. Told the would-be robber to leave. And you know what? They did. They actually left. The presence of that firearm was enough to stop the crime from going any further. Police say the robbers were arrested. Numbers of arrests and the identities of those arrested have not been released. New Orleans Times-Picayune again says unclear the name of the business and what items apparently tried to be stolen. But again, thankfully, that ended well for the armed citizen. Finally today, our good deed of the day, Chelsea, Massachusetts, NBC 10 in Boston, with the story of a Chelsea police officer in the right place at the right time and willing and able to lend a hand. Officer Luis Terraza was just starting his shift on Sunday morning, according to NBC 10 in Boston, Massachusetts. He got a call about a woman who was refusing to leave a hotel. He said he gets these types of calls quite frequently, and he thought that he knew what he was going to walk into. But when he got there, he found a woman who was in her 60s. She was not belligerent. She was not, causing a scene. She was looking for help. Terraza said, we asked what was going on, and she said, the government said I was allowed to stay at a hotel for 30 days, and they gave me 90 days of some kind of housing, but they don't have any information. Woman told the police officer she had no money, she had nowhere to go, and Luis Terraza said, all right, he said, I'm going to take care of your room for tonight because I don't want you out in the heat. He said it was like 96 degrees outside. So he paid for the homeless woman's hotel room, gave her some numbers to call the next day. Luis Terraza said she started crying. She almost made me cry. He said she was just thanking us for allowing her to stay there. A fellow officer actually shared this story on social media. NBC 10 reached out to Terraza. He said he was a little embarrassed with all the attention. He says, this is something that you do out of your heart, I guess. He said, my mom is the same age, and I would hope that somebody would do the same thing for her if she were in that situation. Hopefully, that woman was able to get some additional help. But because of the kindness of Officer Luis Terraza there in Chelsea, Massachusetts, she at least was able to get one more day in a hotel rather than being out on the streets. So in the right place at the right time, willing and able to do the right thing. Officer Luis Terraza there in Chelsea, Massachusetts. We thank you, sir, for your very good deed. That is going to do it for this edition of Bearing Arms Cam and Company. I want to thank you for being a part of the program as well. Hope that you enjoy your weekend. Get out and do a little shooting if possible. I think I'm going to try to do that on Sunday. Got some yard work I got to do, but Sunday may be range day. We will be back on Monday with more of the latest Second Amendment news and information from all around the nation. Don't forget, you can subscribe to Town Hall Media on YouTube. That way you never miss one of these programs. Or if you like the audio version instead, just go to Apple Podcasts, wherever your fine podcasts are served up, and search for Bearing Arms Cam and Company. Until we talk again, be well, be safe, be free, and we'll see you soon with another edition of Bearing Arms Cam and Company.